Today, I'm going to be walking you through the ultimate guide to creating, structuring, and running a successful group coaching session. I've personally run over 200 group coaching sessions in the past 4 years, and I'm currently a coach for Rob Dial in his program Business Breakthrough and Business Mastery, where we help coaches grow their coaching businesses online. Here's what I've learned from hosting all of these group programs: what works the best, what keeps people engaged, what makes sure that people show up week after week and feel a really strong sense of community. This is the guide that I wish I would have had the very first group coaching session that I ran to do it more successfully from day one, so that I didn't make the mistakes that I made along the way, to learn what I've learned up until now. So I'm going to guide you through a 3-part process, from planning to running the call to the housekeeping afterwards, to make sure that you're all ready to go. There's even checklists along the way. So if you want to follow along with this worksheet, it's going to be linked below this video. Let's get into it. All right, so we're going to begin with the first phase, which is planning. So what I would like for you to do, if you don't have this already, is just open up a brand new Google Doc and just call this whatever your program name is. So I'm going to give you an example of mine and exactly how I've laid this out. This is to keep you organized. So what do we have here is the main themes of your program is listed right here. So I do backstage pass, which is like a peek over my shoulder as I do stuff. Q&A, which is specifically just meeting your members where they're at and just helping them through whatever they're struggling with. And member makeovers, along with like hot seats, deconstructions. We're going to get into more ideas like that later. But right here, you can have a running list of ideas that have been brought up from your clients or that you think of would be cool in future lessons to come. And you can just add those right to this list. So this is at the top always, okay? Now what I've created here is just a really simple, if you go down here, table of contents. You can add this one with the links. That way, what's cool about this is when you put the subject of your class right with the headline, okay, so like this was May 13th Masterclass, then it's gonna start to show you what you're doing constantly when you're pulling from these different topic ideas. And so at a glance, I can see what we focused on week after week and what we're kind of due for, right? Because I like to rotate through different things at different times. So that's how I organize it on the back end. And so I'll put the date of the exact lesson here, and then the core topic or the core theme right beside it, so that this table of contents will update here. And then below that, I put my notes for this section, which we're going to get into in a minute. So I would recommend you just create this Google Doc for all of your sessions. That way you can just stay organized moving forward. What I was doing before was I would have a separate Google Doc for every single lesson or every single group session. And it just became a mess, and it was kind of frustrating, like trying to revisit stuff that happened before. And so now it's just all in one place, which is just so much nicer. So that's where I would start, is create that. After that, what's really helpful when you're trying to plan out a coaching session is to get a pulse check on your clients and where your community is at right now. And so how I do that is I keep up in our community and I'm looking at what questions are being asked. I'm seeing where people are at. Like, they all have communities and programs of their own that I have access to. So I can go in there and I can see what have they done, what have they not done. And as I'm doing that, a lot of times I also see people who could use a member makeover, who, you know, maybe have watched the training videos and started implementing, but maybe it just needs tuned up a little bit. And with my expertise, we can just make it better, right? And so, you know, that gives me a really good feel for where people are at. And I've also just asked, ask in your community with your clients, and just say, hey, look, what do you think would be the most valuable lesson for next week? Or I want to get some ideas together of what you would like to see more of in this program. And when you do that, you get some incredible ideas. Like, we just had a group coaching session last week, and the idea came straight from one of our members. And I have to say, it was one of my top 5 favorite that we've ever done. And it brought the group together in ways that other things just don't. I mean, and when you have such a strong sense of community because someone feels like they built it because they did, it's only just going to bring your people closer together. So get a pulse check on your clients. What would be the most helpful for them this week? Okay? Then what you do from there is really just choose a topic that aligns with most of your members. Choose a topic that you feel like would be called. And if you're like, I still don't know, then what you can do, this is a little side note here, sometimes I just choose a piece of content that I need to film in my course, and I'll just film it live with my clients. I actually did this yesterday. I needed to film, hey, like, I've already taught you exactly how to film your resources for your course, but what I haven't shown you yet is how you show up and actually film that. Like, how do you bring your energy onto your course when you're just filming to a camera, right? And so I wanted to film that, and so we did it live. And what's really cool about that is you actually get like more feedback, you get more interaction, and you get people asking questions and adding their own insights that you don't get when you just film like I'm filming right now where nobody else is involved, right? So that's really cool. So then really the next part of this is you've got to decide on the delivery. So what kind of format are you going to have here? Are you going to have slides or a bullet point script? So right now, as you see, this is really, it's not a bullet point script. It could also be a worksheet. So like, let's add that here, because you could just follow along with your worksheet and it kind of acts as both slides and a bullet point script, which is kind of cool. So decide on your delivery. What makes sense for you? I do all of them. It just depends what mood I'm in when I'm actually filming the content and what I think would be best for the person on the other side. So this one, is the ultimate guide. And so that meant like I needed to have a guide. I needed a worksheet, something that could be worked through as somebody is creating their group coaching session, right? And so that's where this idea came, to just use a worksheet and to basically follow along in that and riff on my experience as we go. Okay. So decide on your delivery. And then from that, it's like what resources might be useful in this type of training, right? When you're working with your clients, would a meditation be useful? Music, journal prompts, right? What would help them on their journey with you? What would help them be more focused, be more present? And what I'm going to do is actually walk you through exactly what that looks like running the call. And I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas there. But now okay. So if you're like, Jamie, having a course sounds great, but I don't even know, I don't have a course mapped out or anything like that. If that's something that you want to do and you're ready to start getting a resource portal put together, in this video right here, I actually walk you through exactly how to begin mapping out your program. So I'll A to Z walk you through exactly how to do that. So check that video out after this. Cool. And then just a little note on the recording. I record my group sessions using Fathom AI Note Taker. I also have a video about that right here. So check out Fathom Note Taker. It's absolutely free. Why I do that is because after the session is over, I can easily, within 5-10 seconds, grab the link to the recording and I can send that out to clients who maybe missed the call right away. And so they don't have to wait 24 to 48 hours while me and my team get the time to post the video up in our replay portal. They get access immediately. And the other part to that is it actually creates an AI summary of the meeting so that I don't have to try to figure out what the best way to describe it would be. It just does all that work for me. So I can copy and I can paste the description later when we do place the replay in a portal, and I can just use that summary. And so it's a lot more beautifully written than I would have written it, right? So that pretty much summarizes the planning section. It usually takes me about an hour, sometimes less. It kind of depends, but I give myself like 30 minutes to an hour to plan a lesson. Beautiful. Sometimes less, by the way. Like sometimes it takes me 15 minutes. It just depends. Okay, so now let's get into the second phase of this, which is actually running the call. So I'm going to talk to you about everything from what activities should you be doing on the call to how do we actually make sure that our members are engaged, whether you have 5 people on the Zoom call or whether you have 100. How do we make sure that we're engaging people and they're staying on for the entire time with their cameras on and they're engaged, they're interactive. So we're going to talk about that. So let's get into it. So what I like to do, I'm going to walk you through A to Z, okay? So this is going to be from the waiting room to the time that we're closing. So I'm actually going to go in the order at which you run a call, okay? So just also watch the way that I'm doing this, okay? So what I start the call with is a waiting room. I start the call 5 minutes early where I'm playing music to get them hyped up. So I like to use like house music or EDM or summer vibes, like just something that's got like a uplifting, positive tone to it. Okay, so open the room 5 minutes early and let people in. Get them fired up. Okay, and then right at time. Okay, so let's say your call starting at 9 a.m. Right at 9 a.m., you turn your camera on, turn your microphone on, lower the music a bit till it's just subtly going behind your voice, and you're like, all right, everybody, like, how are you feeling? Like, I'm fired up. Everybody drop a win in the chat. Drop something in there that's been a micro win, some progress forward, something you've gained since we've spoken last week. Right, that's one way you could do it. Type a win in the chat. Another thing is like share something positive or share a word. What's one word that summarizes how you're feeling right now? Right, these are all things you can do to get people fired up. So share it in the comments. And then what I do is I'll go through and I'll actually read those comments. Right, I'll read some of them. Which what does that do? That brings people closer together. It shows them they're not alone in their wins and what they're dealing with, right? And so it brings the community closer together when you do that. and they start to be like, oh my gosh, Janice, like you were just talking about how you wanted to sign a client, and look at you signed one ever since we spoke last week. That's amazing, right? And they're cheering for each other. They're all excited. So go through wins. Spend like a couple minutes there just celebrating your people because they're getting success in your program. Like you want to celebrate them, right? So take time in your wins. From there, we want to introduce the topic and why this topic is important to them. I can't stress this enough. It's basically like how I framed this video. It's like, look, we're going to go through the ultimate guide to creating, structuring, and running a successful group coaching session. So if you stick around by the end of today, I'm going to walk you through my 3, you know what I'm saying? It's like, this is what you're going to get from this video. You're giving them a promise. So I actually gave you a framework here, and I actually didn't have this. This is why it's so cool filming live. So when I filmed my live group coaching session yesterday, I gave them this framework, which is actually adopted from Alex Hormozi, Promise, Proof, Path, and everybody said that was their number one takeaway from yesterday was this framework. And so I was like, of course I have to add that in today because the framework is amazing. So what Alex recommends, Alex Hormozi, is he says we should always lead our content with promise, proof, and path. So what's the promise that this session is going to fulfill? Like what is the ultimate outcome that they're going to achieve if they stick around and they actually are a part of this session today? Okay, what's the proof? What's the social proof that you have that you can speak on this subject about? Right? Like I literally have mine here for you as an example of the one that I used today as we were filming this session. It's interesting because filming a group coaching session, a lot of times is structured very similarly to filming long form content, whether that's for a podcast or YouTube channel. Okay. But where we're getting in a little bit about how to keep people engaged, that's different, right? So then the path. I'm going to walk you through a 3-part process or 3 steps, or I'm going to give you a list of things to do for this, for your morning routine, right? Those are all examples. So promise, proof, path. That's how you start the session, okay? Then it's kind of dropping into like, why is this, like ultimately, why is this important? Solidify their reason for actually wanting to be a part of this training, okay? That's it. That's the beginning. That's how you introduce what's coming today, what you're going to focus on. Okay, then from there, we have the body of the call. The whole thing I actually want to make sure that we emphasize here is don't give your people too much information. And I know it's funny because I'm giving you kind of a lot now, but I need to make this well-rounded. It's got to be the whole system or else it's only part of it, right? And you'll be left hanging. So have one core takeaway from the entire lesson. Don't give them too much or it's not going to do any good. So your core takeaway from this lesson is you should know how to effectively run an entire group coaching session from planning all the way to the replay, really. Okay? So here's some recommendations for activities that you can do during the session. I like to do 2 or 3 of these usually as kind of my sweet spot. So here's some of the things that you can do. You can do breakout rooms. You can give them a specific topic or coaching questions or journal prompts that they can do together. Just breakout rooms. They're really effective. Or you could do some journal prompts. I like to play music for 2.5 minutes and just let them just see what flows through with guided journal prompts. And what's cool about it is it gives them the time and the space just to take time for them and to focus on solving a specific problem and getting through a block, right? Q&A sessions. I always, every single call, have a Q&A session at the end before I wrap up. Always. Okay? And sometimes I even allow them to raise their hand inside of the core content as questions come up as we're going. But sometimes that gets a little intense and I ask them to hold questions till the end. Okay? Shares. Like, for example, after you have a training followed by a journal session, a lot of times it's really great to bring people back to come and share. Or if they just did a breakout room, have them come back and share something they learned about their partner. Share something they learned about themselves. Right? Because what that does is spark other light bulbs in other members and brings them all closer together. Okay? All of these things are going to make your program more sticky, so people are going to be around longer, and it's going to make them feel more cohesive as a unit, like they're all building something together, which is really cool. Hot seats. This is really fun. So it's basically pulling up a member into a hot seat and helping them hone their specific craft. So whether that be a sales call or working on their course or showing up on camera, you're basically just highlighting them the whole session and helping them through whatever it is they're struggling with. And you can have a specific thing that you help them with. Member makeovers is kind of similar to hot seats. It's just hot seats, we're more putting them in a seat to show their expertise or show what they know and they learned, and we're kind of like guiding them and coaching them through that. Where a member makeover is like, show me the thing you did and let's see how we can tweak it and make it better. Okay? And then we can do deconstruction calls. Look, there's so many ideas that you have, and you have access to this afterwards, which is really cool. But there's deconstructions where you could go through a sales call, you could deconstruct their DM conversations, just deconstruct what they've been doing and help them get through it. Okay, or a masterclass, which is where basically, kind of like what I'm doing right now. This would be considered a masterclass. You're teaching on a specific subject, and that's it. Okay? Cool. So now I'm going to run through a couple ways that you can boost your audience's engagement. I've actually heard sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, it's really difficult to keep the audience engaged when it's virtual because they've got distractions. They might have kids running around. They might be trying to work over here and do kitchen over here stuff and not fully present. But there's a couple things that I've learned that you can do that are just going to make it more interactive and engaging for your audience, so they stick around. So the first thing is call on people. Have them share. Right? So if I'm on a group coaching session and I have a lot of the same people raising their hands and sharing, I'll actually call on someone that I haven't heard from. Like yesterday, I hadn't heard from one of our members. Her name is Karen. I was like, hey, Karen, I haven't heard from you today. You've been really quiet. Tell me what's going on with you. And the thing that she responded with and said was so wildly valuable to everybody else. And I'm not sure she would have raised her hand if I wouldn't have called on her. So it makes sure they're listening. It also gets them engaged, and it brings the group closer together. Again, common theme here. We want to bring the group closer together. Okay? So ask them frequently to type in the chat. So if you were live with me right now, I would say, have you ever been called on in school and you maybe weren't listening, and then ever since then you had to listen to the rest of the presentation super close because you didn't want to miss anything after that, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's why we should do that on Zoom too, right? We should call people out and we should get them engaging and sharing and not letting them be a lurker in the back of the room with their camera off where they might be doing other things distracted. We want them to be present with us. And that's another good point of doing breath work or a meditation in the beginning is really helpful because it anchors them into the present moment and gets them here with you versus wherever else they could be. Okay? Coach them live. Grab people up, especially during Q&A. They think they're just asking a question, but actually you're coaching them. So when they ask a question, they raise their hand. There's a little button on Zoom to get them to raise their hand. You pull them up and you coach them live. They'll get so much value from it. They're going to keep coming back week after week after week because of all this value. Yeah? Okay, and that kind of answered the second one. Have them literally raise their hand on Zoom, not like this, but there's a little button that has a hand emoji. And what that's going to do is it's going to put them in a queue in the order at which they raise their hands. So you're going to start to see them on the top of your screen. What would happen before is people would just type question in the chat. And the problem with that is when we have our members so engaged in the chat, you're going to lose all those questions. And it's just annoying to have to scroll back through them. And so Zoom's feature of a raise hand is so nice because it just creates a queue for you and you don't miss anyone. So definitely have them actually literally raise the hand on Zoom, okay? And then I also, depending on what type of training I'm doing, and also the size of group, I'll actually just say, hey, look, does anybody have anything to say to this? Any question, comment, concern, feedback? Just unmute yourself. I'm going to hear from you, right? So I don't always make it so formal as they have to raise their hand. I'm like, you know what? If you feel called to share right now, just unmute yourself and share. And that just a lot of times just gives people permission to just open up, which is really cool. So once you've done the core training here, so I've given you a lot of ideas of chunks that you can pull and play around with and move around, then I drop into a Q&A. So if we were on this call right now, I would say, okay, so what questions do you have? What share do you have from today? What do you feel called to bring in right now? And we'll get a bunch of hands up and we'll spend 10, 15 minutes going through questions. Okay? Seeing what comes through, coaching when necessary. It's hardly ever where nobody has questions. I think it's maybe happened once. And if you're feeling resistance around questions and no one's raising their hand, does anybody have feedback or questions about something that's not related to the topic today? Right? And at that point, if nobody is raising their hands before, now you definitely have hands raised. Or you could say, hey, does anybody want to do a quick hot seat? And whatever you're struggling with, let's just bring it into this container right now because we've got 15 minutes to see what we can accomplish during this time. So that's really helpful too. So just a couple ways if it gets like weird and nobody raises their hand, a couple things you can do that just are really subtle and low key to keep the training moving forward. Cool. And then from there, it's really just a summary and an action plan. So summarize what the main takeaways were from the day and say, okay, write down in your journal or circle the one thing that is your core takeaway from today that you're going to implement moving forward. So a lot of times what happens in group coaching sessions, especially if there's a lot of really good information or someone's new, it feels like they're drinking out of a fire hose and there's so much information coming at them at once. And so what I like to do is have them just figure out what their number one takeaway was from today so that they can walk away with that thing and kind of like shelf everything else until they're ready for it. But if we can just implement that one thing, I feel like it's been a really successful session. So love it. Beautiful. So now we're on to part 3, which is post-call. So I have a post-call checklist for you here. So what we want to do is we want to download and save the recording. Simple enough, right? But there's a lot of times where I haven't done that right, or my computer was full and so it didn't actually film, which with Fathom that won't be a problem anymore, which is cool. So download and save your recording. Also add it to an external hard drive if you have one. That way it's really safe. Then you upload it into the client portal for replay. So make sure you have a replay portal. If you're running group coaching sessions, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a portal for people to watch the replay and for it to be evergreen content for moving forward. So even in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I have videos from 4 years ago where you could go back and you could watch because I've taken care of them. And that's so much valuable content. Think of that. Okay? So then once that's done, you post an announcement that it's up. Hey, replay is live about this. Then below that, add the AI summary of what it was all about and link to where they can find the recording. And what I like to do as a call to action is what was your number one takeaway from today? So once again, we as a collective and as a community are able to hold them accountable to that one thing. And we also get light bulbs going off in other places of people who are like, oh my gosh, I didn't catch that part. I need to go back to the replay and watch that because I didn't get that. You know, it's just really helpful for other people to see what the takeaways were. And they'll get light bulbs too. Okay? So the last part to this is get feedback and add ideas to the Google Doc. So once again, I'm constantly asking, what do you want to see more of? How did you like that training? What could be better about that worksheet? Like, you better believe I'm going to be asking for feedback about this worksheet because I want to keep making it better. So you might go watch this and it might be changed because I got feedback to make it better. Right? So ask your community and be open to feedback. It's one of the best possible things that we could get. Right? So that basically summarizes it. The ultimate guide to create, structure, and run a successful group coaching session. This is it. Take this guide, work through it the next time that you go to create. Don't get overwhelmed. You could literally start with one thing. You could do, if you want to take all the pressure off of you, provide some journal questions to your people, put them in breakout rooms where they can work with each other. They're going to get probably more value out of that than anything else you could do. And it takes a lot of pressure off of you having to run something. Okay? So choose something and just start. Because then what begins to happen is you're like, okay, we did this week. I think what would be really cool next week is this. And the ideas just start to flow. But if you're at this place where you haven't started and you're worried about launching a group program and it's just all this fear is just stacking, you're just going to remain stuck and stagnant. And so the idea here is let's just choose our first one, even if you just literally open it up as a Q&A session and you just create your own framework. I will be freaking happy for you because you've done it and you've started, and I'm sure your clients are going to get so much value from that. So remember, they can't get value from you if you don't just do the damn thing. So choose a date if you don't already have one. Choose a time block in your schedule. This is your action item. You see what I'm doing here? I'm actually following this framework right now. Here's your number one action and thing to do. Okay? It's to time block a space where you're going to plan your group coaching session and get it done. Get it on the schedule so that you can show up effectively in that time. Okay? And then if you were taking notes during this or you've got this worksheet in front of you, circle, highlight, whatever you've got to do, the number one takeaway from today that you want to make sure that you implement in your sessions moving forward. So I appreciate you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, I I'm just getting started. I have so much more that I can't wait to share that's going to help you build systems to ultimately own your life and own your work as you build up your coaching business. So hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next video.